Hello and welcome. My name is Genaro Oliveira and I'm a PhD student here at the TU Vienna at the Christian Doppler Laboratory for Innovative Control and Monitoring of Automotive Powertrain Systems. Today I'm going to give you a presentation called Battery Aging Modeling and Health Monitoring, which covers some of the topics that I've been studying here during my PhD. In our society today, electric vehicles are a reality, and what we want here is to achieve intelligent and efficient operation of such vehicles. In order to do that, we need to take some key steps. The first one is to minimize the battery degradation of the battery and while maximizing the range and the safety. All of this while being compliant with the current legislations on electric vehicles. In order to do that, we developed two main modules here. The first one is the so-called aging prediction model, which tries to estimate what will happen to the capacity in the future based on some load that occurs right now. The second one is regarding capacity estimation, which tries to estimate at the current moment what the capacity value is for a cell or a battery. As you see in the figure on the right, these modules operate into different frames, so the capacity estimation being now, as I said, while the aging prediction model being the future. All of this while using operational data to make the predictions. And one might ask why we need to track this capacity. And tracking this capacity is important because it has a large impact on the cell energy calculation, which affects a lot of algorithms in a battery management system, or BMS. And a very accurate state of charge estimation also depends on the cell capacity. And of course, we want to answer the question, okay, how can we operate the cell in a way where we minimize the degradation? As I mentioned before, I'm a member of the Christian Doppler Laboratory here at the TU Vienna, which is running now for almost 4 years, with 3 more years to go. The head of the laboratory is Professor Christoph Hametner, and we do our work in cooperation with AVL List in Graz. And the main research directions here is to try to model components for state estimation, and as I mentioned as well, mitigate degradation, doing some powered hardware in the loop tests under real driving conditions, and also to achieve prediction, multi-level control, and operating strategies. You can see our website in the bottom and visit it if you wish. The first topic then is regarding aging prediction. The goal here is to estimate how much of the battery will degrade based on some predefined operational data. Here we're using the current, the voltage, and the temperature of this lithium-ion cell. These aging models, they allow us to estimate the battery end of life based on actual usage, all while incorporating the battery aging into algorithms and finding operating strategies that minimize such degradation. There's a large amount of data that are required to parameterize such models. So testing is really expensive and time-consuming, and it's really interesting for everyone involved that these tests are kept to a minimum necessary due to the high costs associated with it. Here we have a few steps that we took in order to develop such model. First, we have the data set, which is a large-scale accelerated aging test on roughly 200 cells. Then we run a feature extraction procedure, which extracts the data and processes them to extract the relevant features that we deem important for aging. Then we create an aging model based on this to predict the capacity fade. And finally, we run an information-based analysis in order to estimate how much of the data would have been really needed to achieve a similar validation performance on the validation set. Okay, the first of these steps is the so-called feature extraction. This is based on expert knowledge and based on what we deemed was important from literature to track that causes the cell to age. A very simple example of this is simply by extracting, for example, from the current profile, here semi-solid blue, the average charge and discharge current on a certain time interval. A more complicated example is by treating the SOC channel and then breaking it down into elementary cycles, which are denoted as delta DODs. And over the lifetime of the cell, we can track this information because it's really important for the aging of the cells. In the end of the day, we achieved some really good results for most of the cells, as you can see in the histogram, and most of the performance of the cells are located in the lower 25% quantile of the total results on the validation set, is important to say, while of course we have some outlier cells that our assumptions were not able to model. So some examples of this is I'm showing you here 4 different cells, and for the first one here on the upper left, you can see that the normalized capacity is tracked really well. The data is here denoted as the axis and the model prediction as a solid red line. And of course on the top you can see the average aging conditions associated to each variable here that I'm showing. So the average temperature, the average delta DOD, and the number of cycles. And you can see, for example, that for the lower right cell, where we have a pretty high temperature, a pretty high delta DOD average, and an okay number of cycles, the model actually predicts that the cell will degrade a bit more than it actually did due to the harsh operating conditions. But in all other cases, the model is able to track it really well, even in the lower left case, where there is really just an error on the first estimate, but since it's open loop, this carries over to the rest of the prediction, which could be fixed and using a SOH observer that I'm going to talk about later in conjunction with this. Something very important to answer now is, given the data set that we have, how much of it would have been needed to train a model with a similar performance? And there are 2 ways to look at this. The first one is by minimizing the number of cells that we use and or at the same time minimizing the testing time that we need to carry on. We did this based on the idea of the fish information, which we try to maximize the fish information matrix associated to a subset of the data. And we did this by finding the d-optimal combination of cells via backward selection, which means that at each we start with the full set and then we remove the cells that contribute the least to the information. This can be seen in this plot right now, which the solid black line shows the normalized information change over the number of cells by using this approach that I just mentioned, versus deleting random cells from different realizations. Now we compare the validation root mean squared error of the proposed approach from this d-optimal combination of the cells versus the random realizations. And we basically see what happens to this performance as the number of cells in the training dataset changes. And basically we see that we can remove many more cells from the training set and still have a validation performance that is good. Here we're comparing it to random realizations of combinations of the training set. And regarding the testing time then, we took 40 cells here and then just varied the total amount of testing time that we allowed the data to be used for training. And we see here that with roughly half of the testing time, or 10 months for example, there's almost no difference on the validation performance, which is really interesting. So at the end, we were able to achieve some really good results for the data set that we are considering here, with 1/3 of the cells and testing for half of the time. And doing this would yield a 10% relative error with respect to the full training set. For the SOH estimation then, the goal is to track the cell capacity online, which is a different problem now. And this is important because we need to estimate when the cell achieved end of life, and as I mentioned before, it has a high impact on the majority of the algorithms in a battery management system. This block diagram shows a way in which the SOH observer would be connected to an SOC observer and to the aging prediction models, together with the feature extraction block, and how they would work together to create an estimate of the capacity now and a prediction of the capacity change in the future. In order to achieve that, we need to have an accurate cell model for the SOC observer and the SOC observer on itself. And there, of course, there are some challenges that are associated with it, mainly temperature effects and defining properly the algorithm parameters and weights. in this figure, what you see is the normalized capacity of the cell changing over time, and we estimate it. So we treat here the data as a stream, so as new tests are available, we basically treat them and estimate the capacity online and recursively, so that vertical dashed gray lines are the test transitions. And for this specific cell, there was a special lab procedure that allowed us to estimate the correct capacity of the cells for different temperatures, and this is seen by these colored dashed lines here. And of course, in the solid blue line, we have the output of our SOH observer, and we see that even with a bad initialization, we are able to track accurately the capacity of the cell over the lifetime with a low error, while of course accounting for the temperature effect on it. So in the end of the day, this shows that we are able to track the capacity over time in a real scenario. Okay, to wrap it up, we've developed an aging prediction model which can predict the cell degradation with some applications to data reduction as well. Additionally, we've developed an SOH observer that tracks the cell capacity in a realistic scenario using real measurement data, being accurate and robust to temperature changes. This is it from my side, and please feel free to contact us for any further information. Thank you.